This story is a work of fiction inspired by emotional and dramatic relationship themes. It contains mature subject matter, including infidelity and emotional distress. Reader discretion is advised. The characters and events are fictional and do not represent any real individuals. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who cheats, let alone with a married man, let alone over 200 times. But here I am, sitting in a tiny apartment that doesn't feel like home anymore, wondering why the man I was going to marry walked out and never looked back. People say guilt eats you alive, but in my case it hid. It crawled into a quiet place in my mind, buried under justifications, small lies, and moments I convinced myself didn't matter. Now it's roaring in my ears, and all I can do is whisper, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was engaged to a man who loved me deeply. He planned our future down to the little house with the blue curtains and the golden retriever we'd get one day. He trusted me with his whole heart. I thought I could juggle it all: love, lies, lust, and come out clean. I thought as long as I didn't feel anything for my boss, it didn't count as betrayal. But betrayal doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care that you cried in the shower or promised yourself each time would be the last. It only cares that you did it. I don't know where he is now, my fiancé. The one I said yes to in front of our families, in front of God. He packed a bag the night he found out and disappeared. Deleted his social media. Changed his number. As if I never existed in his life. As if I'm just a name he wants to forget. People ask me what happened. Why would he leave you like that? You two were perfect. I nod and say something vague like, we had differences. But inside, I'm screaming, I broke him. I smashed his heart into 1,000 sharp pieces, and now I have the audacity to act surprised that he's bleeding. You might be wondering why I did it, why anyone would risk so much. The truth is, it didn't start as something scandalous. It began with attention. Innocent conversations. A compliment here, a joke there. My boss was smart, confident, and knew how to make someone feel seen. At first, it felt harmless. Empowering, even. But feelings shift, lines blur, and suddenly you're in too deep. Too far to swim back, too ashamed to scream for help. That's how I ended up here, alone, cold, and haunted by the choices I pretended weren't real. This is my story. Not because I want sympathy. Not because I want forgiveness. But because sometimes the most painful truths deserve to be said out loud. It all began on my first week at the company. I was 24, newly hired, and excited about finally landing a stable job after months of rejections. The office was sleek and modern, and I felt like I had finally stepped into the adult version of my dream life. Then I met him, Mr. Alden Ross, the regional director. He wasn't exactly movie star handsome, but he had this quiet confidence, the kind that made people listen when he spoke. He remembered my name on day 1, complimented my presentation on day 5. By the second week, he was already offering to mentor me over coffee. At first, it felt like recognition. I had always been a good student, a quiet worker, someone who flew under the radar. Having someone important notice me made me feel exceptional. That feeling was addictive. It started with casual one-on-one meetings. He'd ask about my goals, my past relationships, my thoughts on leadership. Looking back, it was calculated. He knew how to make someone feel special, how to blur the line between personal and professional. Then came the night of the quarterly dinner. He'd had a few drinks, loosened his tie, and leaned in a little too close when he spoke. His hand grazed my lower back as he guided me out of the restaurant. I didn't move away. I told myself it didn't mean anything. A week later, I stayed late to finish a report. He came into my office with 2 glasses of wine, said I deserved to celebrate. We drank. We laughed. One minute we were sitting side by side at the desk, and the next, his lips were on mine. I didn't stop him. That's the part that haunts me. The next morning, I expected regret. Instead, I found a note on my desk. You're brilliant. Last night was unforgettable. No apologies. No guilt. Just validation. And like a fool, I soaked it in. It wasn't love, not even close. But it gave me something I couldn't name: power, attention, excitement. He didn't promise me anything, but he didn't push me away either. And I took that as a sign to keep going. Weeks turned into months. The encounters became more frequent, more secret. Hotels booked under aliases, meetings masked as strategy sessions. I was always careful. I told myself I was in control, that I could stop whenever I wanted. I didn't see it for what it was, a slow unraveling of who I was and what I stood for. When I met my fiancé later that year, I told myself it was a fresh start, that I could compartmentalize. But secrets don't sit quietly forever. They grow, they fester, and eventually, they demand to be seen. And mine? It had already begun to show its cracks. Lying came easier than I expected. At first, I was clumsy, pausing too long before answering, mixing up stories, over-explaining. But soon, I became good at it. Too good. And that scared me. I was living two lives. In one, I was the loving, loyal fiancé. We went on dates, talked about wedding colors, and spent Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. He, Daniel, was everything a woman could ask for. Kind, patient, honest to the core. He looked at me like I was his entire future. I convinced myself that I loved him. And maybe, in a way, I did. But love built on dishonesty isn't really love. It's possession dressed in affection. In the other life, I was the woman who got texts like conference room, 20 minutes, or room 417. Don't be late. My boss, Alden, never said the words "I love you." He didn't need to. This wasn't about love. It was about power, lust, control. But I was hooked. There were times I'd leave Alden's hotel room, fix my hair in the elevator mirror, then meet Daniel for dinner like nothing had happened. It became a routine. One version of me wore silk, lingerie, and silence. The other wore guilt and a diamond ring. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once Daniel and I got married, I'd cut it off, that the affair would fade like a bad habit. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I wasn't strong enough to let go. And Alden knew it. He played it well, never texting anything too revealing, always using burner apps. He was experienced. This wasn't his first secret. I was probably just another in a long line of young, ambitious women he'd broken into. But the worst part wasn't the sex. It was how easy it became to look Daniel in the eye and pretend. Pretend I was faithful. Pretend I deserved the kind of love he gave me so freely. He would say things like, "I trust you more than anyone." And I would smile, feeling like a monster. I started giving excuses when I was late. Work emergency. Got caught in traffic. Had to finish a last-minute report. He believed every word. Because trust is a blindfold you wear willingly. My friends noticed I was distant, distracted. I blamed stress, deadlines, wedding pressure. Nobody suspected the real reason. Why would they? I looked happy, smiled in photos, held Daniel's hand like I meant it. But at night, in those quiet moments between pretending and sleeping, I could feel the rot spreading. I was standing on two foundations, one of truth, one of lies, and the gap between them was widening fast. I thought I could manage it, control it, keep the truth buried. But secrets don't stay quiet forever. At some point, guilt became a dull ache I learned to live with, like background noise. It never disappeared, but I found ways to quiet it. I told myself Daniel was happy. I told myself Alden's marriage wasn't my concern. I told myself I was doing the best I could in a messy world. But lies pile up, and the weight of them starts to change you. Alden grew bolder with time. What started as secret rendezvous became something darker. He began texting late at night, even when I was at home with Daniel. If I didn't respond quickly, he'd follow up with passive-aggressive remarks. "Too busy for me now? You didn't mind last night." Once, I tried to end it. I told Alden it had gone too far, that I was engaged now and I needed to move on. He laughed. A cold, confident laugh. You'll come back. You always do. You like how I make you feel. And he was right. I did come back. Again and again. Because despite the guilt, the shame, and the tears I cried in private, I was addicted to the version of me he awakened. The one who felt wanted, irresistible, dangerous. Daniel, on the other hand, started to notice I wasn't present. He'd ask if something was wrong and I'd say no. He began questioning why I was working so late, why I suddenly had weekend conferences or last-minute client meetings. I gaslighted him, told him he was being paranoid, accused him of not trusting me. I hated myself for it, but Alden knew exactly what he was doing. The more I pulled away, the more he reeled me back in. He'd remind me of how special our connection was. He'd say things like, "I know the real you, the one Daniel could never handle." He kept me wrapped in a twisted form of validation, one that made me feel powerful, even as it was slowly destroying my integrity. I'd spend nights in bed next to Daniel, pretending to sleep while he wrapped his arms around me, unaware that the woman he was holding was slipping further away. I began having anxiety attacks. I lost weight. My reflections started looking unfamiliar. Still, I stayed in both worlds. There's something deeply cruel about loving someone and still hurting them. I convinced myself I could protect Daniel from the truth. That as long as I kept the lie intact, I wasn't really doing damage. But lies are corrosive. They eat through the walls we build, and eventually, everything collapses. Looking back, I can see how unfair it was to both men and to myself. But at the time, I believed I was surviving, managing chaos. I thought I was strong enough to carry it all. I wasn't. Daniel proposed on a quiet Sunday morning in October. There was no crowd, no dramatic display, just the two of us in our living room, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the warmth of morning sunlight. He held out the ring with shaking hands, tears in his eyes, and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you." And I said yes. I meant it in that moment. I looked into his eyes and saw a man who truly loved me, a man who believed in us. I told myself this was the new beginning I had been waiting for, that the affair would end now, that I could finally walk away from Alden and never look back. But the panic hit me like a wave I couldn't control. That same night, Alden called. I ignored it. Then came the messages. "Congratulations," followed by, "You don't think a ring changes anything, do you?" I blocked him for a week. I felt powerful for a brief moment, like I had reclaimed myself. But the silence was deafening. I missed the thrill, the danger, the way he looked at me like I was forbidden and irresistible. A week later, I saw him in the office. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me. Then he cornered me near the elevator and whispered, "You're not done with me. You never will be." And again, I gave in. The guilt came rushing back harder than ever. Every time I met Daniel's eyes, it felt like I was stealing something from him. Every dress fitting, every venue visit, every guest list discussion, I was lying the entire time. I told myself once the wedding was over, I would finally end it. That the affair was the last mistake of my single life. But I was deluding myself. The truth was, I didn't know how to walk away. Alden was like a drug, one I hated but couldn't quit. He didn't even need to try anymore. A single message and I'd fold. And every time I did, I came home to Daniel with a smile that felt like poison. The duality of it all was killing me. I was trying on wedding dresses one day and meeting Alden in hotel rooms the next. I was lying to vendors, to my parents, to my future husband, and most of all, to myself. Daniel didn't suspect anything. He was too busy being in love, planning our future, building a life on foundations I was quietly shattering. I kept telling myself I'd stop, that tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow always turned into more lies. And the closer we got to the wedding, the more I feared the truth wasn't something I could outrun. It was a shadow, long and inescapable, and eventually it would catch up with me. It happened on a Wednesday night, ordinary, like so many others. I had just come home from what I told Daniel was a team dinner. In truth, I had spent the evening in a hotel room with Alden. I washed off the smell of his cologne in the office bathroom before heading home, heart pounding, rehearsing my alibi over and over. Daniel was on the couch, laptop open, going over honeymoon options. He looked up, smiled, and asked, "Good dinner?" I nodded, kissed his forehead, and walked straight to the bathroom, avoiding eye contact. But something felt off. His tone. The way he looked at me, not with suspicion, but with something heavier. Final. Still, I pretended everything was normal. Later that night, he asked for my phone. "I just want to check something," he said casually, holding out his hand. My heart stopped. I laughed it off. "Why? You don't trust me." He didn't answer. He just looked at me. Not angrily. Not accusingly. Just waiting. That silence cracked me open. I gave it to him. He scrolled. Slowly. He didn't need to dig deep. I'd been careless lately. I deleted messages, but forgot to log out of one of the apps. There it was, Alden's name, masked under a fake contact, with just enough history to burn everything down. Daniel's hands trembled. His face didn't twist into rage. It crumbled into grief. I tried to explain rushed words, broken sentences, half-truths dressed as confessions. He didn't yell. He didn't ask how many times. He didn't want the details. He just said, "How long?" I whispered, "A year and a half." That was it. He stood up, went into the bedroom, and began packing a small bag. I followed him, begging, crying, swearing it was over. I dropped to my knees. I held his hand, but he looked at me like I was a stranger. "You could have told me," he said. I would have been devastated, but I would have respected the truth. But this? You lived a lie, and you let me build my whole future on it. He walked out that night. No shouting, no door slamming, just silence. That was the most painful part, how quiet the end was. I stayed up until dawn, staring at my phone, hoping for a message. A sign that he'd come back. That maybe there was still a chance. There wasn't. In the days that followed, he disappeared. Deleted his accounts. Blocked my number. Told our mutual friends not to give me updates. It was like I had been erased from his world entirely. And I couldn't even blame him. Because I had destroyed everything, quietly, deliberately, and with full knowledge of the consequences. Still, I sat there for weeks, asking myself the same stupid question over and over. Why is he so mad? But deep down, I knew the answer. In the weeks that followed Daniel's disappearance, I unraveled. At first, I thought he'd cool off. That after the shock wore off, he'd come back needing closure, needing to hear me out. I told myself, he loves me too much to just walk away. But he didn't. He vanished with the kind of silence that says everything. I sent messages, apologies, explanations, even confessions that I had never planned to say out loud. He never replied. Not once. Mutual friends stopped calling. Some offered awkward condolences, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. They knew. Everyone knew. Word travels fast when a wedding is called off without explanation, especially when the bride is the reason. My parents were heartbroken. My mother couldn't look at me the same. My father asked one quiet question, "Why would you ruin someone who trusted you?" I didn't have an answer. Alden? He moved on. Fast. A few weeks after Daniel left, I found out he was flying out with his wife for a vacation, celebrating their anniversary, no less. I wanted to vomit. All that destruction, and he still got to keep his life. His wife, his status, his power. I had nothing. The wedding dress I once adored now hung lifeless in the back of my closet. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. I tried. I zipped it into a garment bag, walked it halfway to a donation bin, then turned around. It felt like a corpse I wasn't ready to bury. I stopped going out. Quit my job a month later. I couldn't bear seeing Alden across the hall, couldn't bear pretending like nothing had happened. He barely flinched. Just said, Hope you figure things out. That was the last thing he ever said to me. I had destroyed the only pure, honest love I'd ever been given. And for what? For a man who saw me as nothing more than a thrill, a secret, a weakness he could indulge when convenient. I cried more in that first month than I had in my entire life. Not just because I lost Daniel, but because I realized how deeply I had betrayed myself. I used to be someone who valued truth, loyalty, commitment. And somehow, I had become someone I couldn't recognize. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness, it was the silence. The absence of Daniel's voice. His laugh. His presence. He had this way of making any place feel like home. And now, every room felt cold. I stopped wearing my engagement ring. For a while, I left it on the nightstand, hoping. I don't know what I was hoping. Maybe that he'd walk in and ask for it back. Maybe that I'd wake up and this would all be a bad dream. But it wasn't. This was my reality. The wreckage of a life I built on lies. It's been almost a year now. Sometimes I still wake up reaching for Daniel. There are moments, brief, piercing ones, when I forget he's gone. But the truth always rushes back, cold and sharp. He's not coming back. And I understand why. At first, I couldn't. I kept telling myself I made a mistake, but I still loved him. Doesn't that matter? Doesn't love deserve forgiveness? But love without honesty isn't love. It's manipulation dressed up in warmth. I didn't just cheat on him physically. I cheated emotionally. I stole his peace, chipped away at his trust, and wore a mask every day that said, "I'm loyal to you." The betrayal wasn't just what I did with Alden, it was how easily I let Daniel believe he was safe with me. How I held his hand while planning a wedding, knowing full well I was still living a lie. I used to tell myself Alden didn't really matter. That it wasn't love, so it wasn't betrayal. But that's the most dangerous lie I ever told myself. Just because something isn't love doesn't mean it can't destroy love. Daniel didn't leave because of sex. He left because of everything that came before and after it. The deception, the denial, the erosion of trust. And maybe the most painful truth of all, I didn't stop on my own. He had to find out. I let it go on until it exploded in his hands. I've tried therapy. It's helping slowly. I've been forced to ask myself questions I spent years avoiding. Why did I need Alden's attention so badly? Why did I ignore every red flag? Why did I feel powerful hurting someone who only ever loved me? The answers aren't clean. They're messy and uncomfortable. Because I was afraid of being ordinary. Because I mistook validation for worth. Because I liked the thrill more than I valued stability. Because somewhere inside, I believed I didn't really deserve Daniel, and maybe I was right. Now, I live a quiet life. No more pretending. No more lies. I go to work, I come home, I sit with my choices. I've learned that guilt is loud at first, then quieter, but never gone. Sometimes I see couples in parks or at restaurants, holding hands, laughing softly. And I think of Daniel. I wonder if he found someone else. I hope he did. I hope she loves him purely, honestly, without the rod of secrets. As for me, I'm not asking for sympathy. This isn't a redemption story. It's not a plea for forgiveness. It's just the truth, finally, completely. I lost the love of my life. Not because he couldn't handle my past, but because I lied about it in the present. I've learned that the real damage isn't always in what you do, but in what you hide. And I hid everything, until it was too late. I leapt with my